All right, hello everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer questions, give philosophical perspectives, formulate and explore arguments, and deep dive into particular topics of your choice. Ian has asked me to review the 1973 film The Holy Mountain by Alejandro Jodorowsky. This was an experience. It was a very strange film, very weird film. I was asked a few months ago to review the TV show Xavier Renegade Angel, and now I feel like I'm being asked to go to the opposite end of the spectrum, arguably perhaps to the thing that Xavier Renegade Angel was slightly making fun of. So let's get into it. To begin with, this was my experience of watching this film was I felt as if I was watching a high fashion show. You know those runway shows where the models walk down and they're wearing like a garbage bag, or they're wearing like some weird angel suit, or something that like no one is ever going to actually wear. And the lay audience looks at these fashion shows the way that high culture people look at WWE. WWE people, like high culture people, look at wrestling and they're like, do they not know this is fake? This is so clearly fake. And the low culture people look at these high fashion shows like, this is ridiculous. Don't they know this is ridiculous? It's the same thing. They don't get each other. High fashion is not about dressing the way that you want people to dress. It's about creating a theme and taking that theme to its logical endpoint, to its most extreme form, as a source of inspiration that fashion designers can take bits of and modify into something that is actually wearable, right? I felt like that, but without that higher level understanding watching this film. It was an extremely weird film, an extremely esoteric film. There is a lot of occult going on in here, which is not very hidden. It's very out in the open. So let's get into it. The plot, such as it is, it follows our protagonist, we'll say, who is not named. We have a nameless protagonist who is called the Thief. But he's not just the thief. He looks like Jesus, and that's like very intentional, and the Jesus persona is taken advantage of, in fact, by some of the other characters in the film. So he is the thief, but he's also Jesus, and he is also the fool from the tarot cards. I happen to own a tarot deck. I use the Justice card as a bookmark for Plato's Republic, and I don't know a whole lot else about the tarot deck, to be totally honest. I've never used it in a tarot fashion. It just seems like an inspiration tool that's been slightly modified from a regular deck of cards. Anyways, so he is the thief, but he's also Jesus, and he's also the fool. And later on in the film, he is joined by a motley crew of wealthy and extremely powerful people who represent the planets. And all of the planets are represented except Earth. So our thief is also Earth. You can already see the layers of symbolism being worked in here. So this thief, the film sort of begins after a very strange esoteric scene of someone doing some strange kind of ritual with two women, and we don't fully know what's going on there exactly. We learn about this character later. It really begins with the thief laying naked in the dirt with his face covered in flies. He's probably drunk, and he's pissing himself. Really off to a solid start there. He looks dead, frankly, but he's not. He's just wasted and immiserated in this world or something. So he wakes up and he's joined by a quadruple amputee midget helper character. And they go on a series of small little misadventures through a very kind of dystopian, gross world. It's not dystopian in the sense of everything is controlled by evil powers. It's dystopian in the sense of, like, there's just a lot of gross things happening. There's some kind of armed police force that's just shooting a bunch of students, it looks like. And as they're killing these students, there's a bunch of, like, tourists who are just watching and seem to be entertained. And the police grab one of the female tourists and have sex with her, and she doesn't seem bothered by it. It's all extremely strange, and it seems to depict the lowness of base existence, the lowness of this earth, maybe. And this is one of those movies that uses a lot of Christian iconography, but is very much not itself Christian. However, it does not seem to be making fun of Christianity. It's one of those kinds of films that attempts to draw spiritual inspiration from Christianity and from Jesus, but does mock the church. You know, and this is not abnormal. Even pastors mock the church, you know. So we're not outside of normal Christian doctrine in doing that. There's a few misadventures with pseudo-religious characters and priests and so forth. These are sorts of details. But where it gets interesting is there's this tower that lowers money by a hook, like a bag of, I think it was gold, down. And a bunch of people come forward and grab it. And our thief comes forward and decides he's curious to see where this gold is coming from. So he climbs up the rope to the top of the tower, which is like kind of ascending from the base reality into something higher, something above. And it turns out at the top of this tower lives an alchemist. And it becomes apparent that this alchemist was, in fact, the character performing the strange ritual at the very beginning. And this alchemist is also, interestingly, the director of the film, Alejandro Jodorowsky. So this becomes important later. When he gets to the top, they have this kind of face-off, this kind of fight almost. And the thief pulls a knife, but the alchemist is able to defeat him, but defeat him in the sense of beating him, not like killing him or injuring him or anything. And after some strange back and forth, the alchemist takes the thief as a kind of apprentice, as a kind of student. And because he asks, do you want more gold? Is that what you're here for? And the thief says, well, yes, I want gold. And maybe there's a lot of sequences to choose from. There's to pick the strangest scene. But in one scene, the thief, there's also a lot of nakedness, just FYI. A lot of nakedness. But it's not sexual nakedness. There's a lot of sexuality, but it's not, like, sexy. Anyways, a digression. In one scene where he's still sort of an apprentice in the tower with this alchemist, he shits in a cup, and the alchemist does this strange process and turns the shit into gold. And he says, you are excrement, but you can turn yourself into gold. And when I saw this, my interpretation of this is like, okay, down low in the world of, like, base matter and the world and society, even the high things even like the most, the most religious people are gross and nasty. But by contrast, up here in the alchemist's high tower above the world, even the grossest things can be made beautiful and valuable. And so, like, my impression was that none of the grossness or the sexuality is there just for shock value. None of it is there. None of it seems to be there just for, titillation or whatever. It all seems to have symbolic purpose. There's the wonderful book called How to Read Literature Like a Professor. And in the book, the author says, basically, almost everything is about sex, right? In high literature, all of the symbols are about sex, except sex. Sex is never about sex in high literature. Sex is always representative of something other than sex. That might sound like a very hoity-toity, kind of pretentious way of writing, and maybe it is, but it's true. True-ish. It's true in this film's case. And there is a lot of sex that is not about sex in this movie. So anyways, he's worked as an apprentice with this alchemist, and at some point the alchemist sends him on a bit of a mission. He joins forces with all of these characters who represent the greatest and most powerful industrialists and businessmen, and one's like a chief of police, and another one is like an architect, and one of them does interior design, and they all live these extremely lavish, eccentric, excessive lives. Like one of them has like several thousand wives, and it's over the top symbolic representation of the most extreme vices of power and wealth taken to their extremity. And so you begin with the lowest of society, which is the thief, and like that's not that great. And then you find these people at the highest points of society, and this is also weird and strange and bad in their own way. And all of them somehow get grouped together to be sent on this mission to climb the holy mountain. And they choose one because there are apparently many holy mountains. And they journey on this trip together, including the alchemist himself, who accompanies them. And they get distracted along the way, but they make it. They make it to the top of the holy mountain, and more strange things and more strange symbolic things happen along the way. But when they get to the top of the holy mountain, and plot spoilers, if you're listening to this, you'll hear some plot spoilers. But by the way, this is one of those movies where plot spoilers don't ruin the film. The first time you haven't really watched this film until you've seen it like 3 or 4 times. And I've only seen it once, so I'm sort of speaking out of my ass here. Because it's a trip. So anyways, they get to the top of the holy mountain, where they are going to meet some elders, some immortals, who have discovered the secret to immortality. That's what they're after, immortality. And when they get to the top, they find the immortals. They come up to the immortals who are sitting stone still around this table. And they discover the immortals are mannequins. They're not real. They're fake. Meanwhile, before they even get to the top, everyone gets to the top except, I think one character died along the way, but I can't tell if they actually died or not. Before they get to the top, the thief is sent back down. He doesn't see the immortals. He is there. There was this prostitute and a chimpanzee who were like kind of following them, intrigued at a distance. And the prostitute seems to really like the thief. So the alchemist says, "You two go together, be a couple, be happy, go back down to the people." And so they go down together, and everyone else, the rest of the planets, the great captains of industry and so forth, who have all shaved their heads and become monks in this process, basically, to get to the top. They reach the top and they discover these immortals are in fact mannequins. They're not even real at all. And then the alchemist turns to the camera and breaks the fourth wall. He says, "Camera, zoom out." And the camera backs up and it shows all the filming equipment, all the people holding the boom mics over and the lights and the rest of the crew. And he speaks directly to the audience, saying, like, there is no immortality, go now and live. Go, we're done with the holy mountain. And which is a very funny I mean, philosophically, it's ambiguous and it's intentionally ambiguous. Spiritually, it's drawing from a lot of different incoherent traditions. There's a lot of Christianity. There's a lot of occultism. There's definitely a Gnostic flavor to a lot of it. There's a ton of like Taoist and Buddhist stuff you could probably pull into from here. But this didn't feel like a philosophical film, and I don't think it even felt like a spiritual film, although it clearly had spiritual intentions. Alejandro Jodorowsky, like very, very intentionally, Alejandro Jodorowsky got very heavily into spirituality, especially Zen Buddhism, in the years before making this film. Under the guidance of a Zen Buddhist monk, he took a lot of hallucinogens and had most of the cast take a bunch of hallucinogens. They all lived at his house together for the month prior to filming, doing religious rituals, presumably meditation, together. And Alejandro Jodorowsky and his wife did not sleep for the week before filming began, intentionally. So there's a lot of what I'll say ascetic, like spiritual asceticism that went into the creation of this film. Whether there's any spiritual value there or not, I don't know. But I think the way to look at this film is as a work of art. It is really creating its own world of visuals and symbolism. And you can't really convey the feeling of this film by just describing what happened. You have to watch, because the use of visuals is, it's not stunning visuals. It's very surreal. It's very surreal visuals. There'll be a scene of someone dying. Someone gets shot and they fall down and a bunch of like birds come out of a hole in their chest. Like live birds, like just come out and fly. It feels very low budget, but it leans so hard into the low budget feel that it works in a strange way. There's a lot of paint instead of blood, and the paint is not always red. Sometimes it's green, sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's yellow, but it all represents blood, you know. And so people will be like, oh, and there's like green paint flying everywhere. At one point, like someone gets it looks like they got shot. This is one of the students who gets shot by the police or something, and they're like, oh, their stomach gets like ripped open, and it's just like the cops run in and they're pulling like sausage links, like actual sausage links out of the hole in their jacket, and it is visually reminiscent of someone's internal organs in a very gory fashion, but it's literally sausages. Now, I've never had a crazy like hallucinogenic mushroom trip or LSD trip. I imagine this film is kind of what that might be like. I doubt it. I feel like it's probably a little milder than that. But the the use of the deployment of visuals works, I think. And it's cool to see because it really shows how far creativity can take you in the domain of art. You don't need this extraordinarily high budget film, or you don't need this extraordinarily high budget starting point to make a good film. You just need a really good idea and some creativity in how you're going to convey that. Now, maybe you can't do that with every idea. You can do these weird, trippy visuals because it fits. It's coherent with the subject matter a little bit. So as a work of art, I've said that some of the scenes work. Does the work of art of this film as a whole work? I don't know. I'm not an artist. But according to Kanye West, or the artist formerly known as Kanye West, it does. According to Marilyn Manson, it does. There are many other artists who have been deeply influenced by this film, artistically. And I feel like I've seen some of its artistic flavor in many, or at least a few, Lady Gaga music videos. Right. So it has influenced high-level artists in our culture today, and I think it's fun to know that the lineage, not just of philosophical ideas, but also of artistic trends and degrees of influence. It's fun to know these kinds of things. I think it's one of those things that I'm going to, because this is a philosophy channel and I like to talk about religion, I'm going to compare it to the ontological argument for God. The first form of the ontological argument for God came from St. Anselm. And it was basically, it was basically God's very nature is perfection, and given two hypothetical beings who are identical, but one which exists and one does not, which does not, the one which exists is more perfect than the one which does not exist. Therefore, God, because he is perfect, exists, because he is the most perfect possible being. Basically, everyone who hears that form of the argument is like, that's bullshit. that's sneaky nonsense that doesn't fly. And it doesn't. It's a really bad argument. But if you are an intelligent person who tries to think past the first initial reaction to something, you might notice there's potential there. There's potential for a good argument in there. And then you might wind up, after many, many hundreds and even thousands of years of iterations, wind up with something like Alvin Plantinga's modal logic argument for God, which says, of all kinds of beings that exist, there are some that are contingent beings and some that are necessary beings. And God is a necessary being, which means, if it is possible that he exists, then he must exist, because everything else is contingent upon him, not vice versa. He's not like a chair, which is contingent on people. It's no. The universe is contingent on him. And so in all the possible universes that might exist, is it possible that God exists in one of them? And if it is possible that God exists in one of them, because he is a necessary being and not a contingent being, then therefore he must exist in all possible universes, including ours. All that is necessary is the granting of the possibility that he could exist in one possible universe. That's a much stronger argument. right? And it takes an eye to see the potential for something stronger in something that isn't maybe fully developed. Now, I'm not an artist, so I'm not going to make any assertions about whether this film is or is not like fully developed as a film. I even have a hard time passing judgment on whether it kind of didn't do it for me. It's not the sort of movie I would watch for fun. I feel like I'm watching really high level black metal. Like I don't enjoy it, but I can see the talent. I can see the skill, and I can see the power in what's being performed. And I think the influence that he's had on the artistic world is subtle but powerful and influential. So, is this movie worth watching? Yes, I would say so. It's very surreal. It's very, very rated R. But just as a dip into the low budget creative potential of someone who wants to show some, it's a really fun film to see what someone can do with a little bit of creativity. I think it's too ambiguous to really take any strong spiritual or philosophical messages from, other than the sort of banal injunction to like go and live. It's like, well, you drew us away from living so we could see this movie. So stop watching the movie, I guess. The timing is, and that's more of a joke than a serious point. Of course, people take breaks from real life to go do an escapism and then they return. And so like telling someone to go return is not telling them to never do an escapism, to never go and have fun and watch a movie or play a video game or read a novel. It's just I mean that's sort of what they're doing in the film, right? They're going up to a mountain and then there's a descent back down. Classic kind of hero's journey stuff there. So, very strange film. I wish I could give something a little bit more concrete. I'm sure people will disagree with me. They'll say, "No, there's a very deep spiritual significance to this," but I'm not sure there is. I think Alejandro Jodorowsky does want us to go and live life. I think he does want us to have relationships with other people and to to think about things, but maybe not get like lost in the clouds doing it. He does seem to have a message, but the message is a very Platonic injunction to do some exploration ourselves. I came away anyways with the strong impression that Jodorowsky doesn't want to give us any answers because that would be too easy. He doesn't want to give us all the answers because that would defeat the purpose of the quest. So, overall, it was a extremely strange film, but a fun film and a worthwhile film. I would give this a recommendation to go watch. It's not a date night movie, I wouldn't say, unless you have a very special, strange kind of significant other. But it's a fun one and it's a good one, and I'm sure I might have more to say about this in future videos later, because it's one of those movies where the visuals kind of stick with you. So, anyways, thanks so much for listening, and take care.